So we are the unpanel of the day because they looked at me like, what are we supposed to do? I said, just show up, everything's fine. So I promise you. Just stand over there, guys, just stand over there. So we know that micro-credentialing and competency-based education has a really robust life in other sectors, and we know that it's coming to education. Well, I don't know about you, but the last few years I thought, how is this going to work? We have all these requirements, and we have people that we have to be masters and slaves to, and I don't know how this is all going to fit together. So when Robert asked us, would you all do a panel? I said, Robert, we don't know anything yet. We're still investigating. He said, that's perfect. And you know, when somebody says that to you, that makes me feel better because we're just in the beginning stages. So with that, we want to take advantage of the invitation for micro-credentialing and competency-based education because we are engaged now in redesigning our principal work. We want to do better by our principals, and we know we need to. Our schools need to change a little bit, and we need leadership to lead that change, and so we're in the midst of doing that. And this has to be part of what we consider and how we consider that. So the truth is, really though, we don't know what we don't know. So today, what we thought was, what a great opportunity to press pause in our professional day and say, okay, so we've come to the table with some knowledge, and then today, I don't know about you, but I've been taking copious notes and looking people up, and there's so many ideas. I told them at lunch, I have a whole list of things that we could be talking about when we get back to work. And so what we wanted to do was press pause and start the process of maybe processing information from today and answering some questions and looking to one another for guidance and support, and also to process what we've heard. So that's what we want to do. That's how we want to proceed with this. So we have some curiosities, and I don't know about you, but one of our big curiosities as an institution of higher ed is, what do we do about these university requirements? Because, you know, they set us down and said you have to have this many contact hours, this many seat hours in order to get this many credit hours. And we're like, how do we do that in a modern world? I mean, how do we do that with asynchronous classes and synchronous classes? And we really have an affinity for the face-to-face, especially in leadership development. We think that's critically important to build that cohort. So how do we blend this and make it accessible for folks, but also doable for us? We also are wondering about what policies need to be revised or rewritten, and how do we go about advocating for that in a very professional way, other than saying, well, that's stupid, it's like 50 years old, can we rewrite that? We can't do that. So how do we do that? How do we advocate for ourselves? Also, the approval of all the alphabet groups that we have. Everything from certification groups to state groups to national groups. How do we figure out that landscape? Really, these are the questions that we're asking, and we know other folks are down the road a little further, so that's why we want to have these conversations today. And finally, that recognition of who values micro-credentials, by whom, and how and why. So I said in another session and got a lot of information about that, but who values these micro-credentials, and what can we do to make them more valuable for our folks? So we would like to do table discussions. We have a guide that we're going to pass out here in just a second. And here's the format for this. You have table baskets, those of you that are at a numbered table. If not, you're going to need to find some table partners. So what we'd like for you to do is follow the discussion guide. We'll go along with you. But we want to look at some of the pros and cons of micro-credentialing or competency-based education from your viewpoint. It can even be those beginning questions about what are some of the pros of this, and then what are some of the cons that we're going to hit. Then we want to talk about something I call speed bumps, which slows you down a little bit, or roadblocks, what's out there that you may be worried about as well as we are. Then I have one, and what we've done is place big posters around the room. I have one about lingering questions and concerns. So after we have these discussions, what are some of those lingering questions and concerns? We also have something called look fors and look out fors. What should we look for as we build these models, and what should we look out for? And then finally, we have kind of a parking lot piece, like other topics that we haven't really addressed. So all of your baskets, Jennifer is like, she's like school supply queen. So we trade stories all the time, but there are Post-it notes in the baskets. So what we'd like for you to do is have these substantive discussions at your table, and then when you're ready, post a couple of suggestions or a couple of questions or the pros and cons on our chart. So I've got a set over here and a set over here. So either side of the room. We'll compile the information later and share it with you. But that's how we want to proceed, because we need time to process, and we want to process with you. So that's what our session is going to be. So the first one that we're going to do are pros and cons of micro-credentialing. So if my colleagues will help distribute some discussion guides will do that by table, and then they're going to help facilitate by table hopping. They're really good at that. They're very social folks, so they're good at table hopping. Yeah, so we're going to do that. And again, this is our substantive processing question time. And we're going to give you 8 minutes on each topic. So once these get distributed, we'll get started.
Okay, if you could just pause for a second. I hate to stop wonderful conversations, but you're going to have an opportunity to go back to those. I've had the opportunity to walk around and listen to the conversations, and they are phenomenal because you're bringing your perspective from where you are in terms of either K-12 or post-secondary or CTE or policy into the conversations. And so I know that U of L has made a very wise decision in how they've structured the session to get these different viewpoints. Would someone be willing to share a few of the pros and cons that you have listed? Well, thank you, Bridget. That was not arranged at all.
Certainly not arranged. I believe it was called voluntold. All right, so the pros and cons we discussed at our table. Seat time versus, moving from seat time to demonstration of competency is definitely a pro. But the fact that there's no financial aid available in the higher education space for the micro-credentials in this manner is definitely a con. Higher quality because of demand was mentioned, while a con around fewer traditional higher education students could be an impact as micro-credentials really take hold. A comment was made about learning being a process in the micro-credentialing space that requires coaching, and that being really good for the learning process. But that coaching is a challenge, so that time in coaching as opposed to traditional methods, more traditional methods of learning can be a challenge. And then who assesses and who assures quality? Not so much a pro or a con, but a question mark. So how do we ensure quality as we move forward with richer micro-credentialing response to learning?
Okay, well, we'll move on to the next one because that's, I think, going to build on the pros and cons. And this next one is about speed bumps and roadblocks. And so one of the things that Bridget said was about financial aid isn't there for micro-credentials, but we're wondering how do they fit within coursework? How can we embed a micro-credential within coursework at higher ed institutions? And you have to understand, for us, we've seen a lot of the teacher create, or the micro-credentials created for teachers, and we're looking through the lens of school leadership. What does that look like, and how does that fit in with certification? So that might be a speed bump that we need to look at. It's not a roadblock for us by any means, but it could be a little speed bump to stop us a little bit, slow us down. But I don't think it's insurmountable. So what we'd like for you to do is continue your conversation, but through the lens of what are some speed bumps we need to be aware of, and then what are some potential roadblocks, not just cons, but absolute roadblocks. So we're going to give you about 8 minutes to have those conversations, and please be prepared to share out too. And don't forget your Post-it notes.
So as you're finishing up on your Post-its, what about speed bumps and roadblocks? Think about something that's been shared at your table that you would like to share out just to pose as wonderings and musings to the group. Do I have any volunteers? Oh, thank you so much.
So our table had a lot of interesting discussion, and the first thing that came up to us are certification requirements. So currently, there's a lot of certification requirements that EPSB requires students to have, and master students to have. And so how are we going to kind of square that circle with micro-credentialings and the idea of choice? Another one that we really thought of was the perception of inadequacies of micro-credentialing. I'll be honest, I was the one who brought up, how is this different than attending a workshop or a 2-day conference and getting your certificate for it? I was quickly educated on how it's different. And yeah, I was thoroughly educated on it. But there is that perception of inadequacy, but there's that perception. So how do we overcome that? How do we overcome the basic evidence or resistance to change? How do we push the needle forward a little bit? And where do we find evidence that supports this? As it's a new idea and something that we're thinking about, we're all about, at least in my profession, we're data-driven and evidence-based. So where do we find the evidence to support these ideas?
Sean Russell, Jefferson County. The biggest roadblock that I see and that I've discovered as I've designed work for my teachers is that we must take the idea of personalization to micro-credentials. They cannot be on islands. If we have a micro-credential, it must be personalized so that teachers can show, I can demonstrate my mastery through a Google form. I can do a demonstration of learning. They have to have the different avenues, and we as the creators of the micro-credentials must provide that framework and those options for them. And if we don't do that, all of this is just going to become compliance. I've got to do it because Maddie said I had to do it.
Anybody else want to share? Those are awesome things to think about. Okay, Marty.
It was a trick. I flipped it off. So sitting at a table of school and district leaders, we discussed the speed bump of leadership capacity, scale, and sustainability. We were discussing our current crisis with a lack of school leader candidates. And then when we think about scaling programs, how that presents as a speed bump for us.
Okay, wonderful. Right, I'm gonna let, Greg, did you want to share something? Lovely, hang on. I'll get it to you.
I think this was discussed earlier, but one of the roadblocks may be how is the shift in the funding mechanism, because we're going from just to be honest with you, the poor districts are looking for all the free PDs to get through the summer to get the teachers the 4 days. So how is this just another avenue of some are free, some are paid for? And I think that's what Dr. Lewis said, but is that basically still what we're doing?
I think the different platforms, some micro-credentials have assessment fees that earners need to pay in order to earn the micro-credential, but those are the ones that exist now on platforms like Digital Promise and Bloomboard. So I think we also have to think about platform, because we know platform matters, that's very important for how successful an earner can be with a micro-credential, but we have to also think differently about those platforms. And would a university have their own platform? Would they go with a national platform? So then that would determine cost as well. But I think a point that you're making about cost also is important, because we don't want folks, ideally, and most people would, I have this awful capacity to try to cook-proof everything and try to think through all the ways that somebody's going to cheat a system and try to prevent it from happening, and you can't do that. So, there are going to be people who shop for badges that are easy to earn. So what happens with that is why we have really started to be very deliberate about saying micro-credentials fit within a system system of competency-based professional learning with a system of supports wrapped around those earners, whether they be teachers or whether they be principals, so to help them select the micro-credential that best fits their needs, to help coach them, to help support them with networking and mentoring. And when professional learning is viewed as an important, critical piece of a system, then hopefully we can flesh out some of that. Well, I call it shopping for junk badges. You know, what's that easiest one to earn? You know, what do I already know a whole lot about? I'm going to get. There is nothing wrong with if I am an expert on formative assessment. I've been through Stiggins, I've been through Jan Chapuis, I've been through all of these things, and I'm an expert. There's nothing wrong with me saying, I want to go ahead and earn that badge in formative assessment because I have that knowledge. But I also have the opportunity to grow and to learn something I don't know. And that's where I need a peer or a colleague or a supervisor telling me, Jennifer, you already know formative assessment. Yeah, earn the badge. But let's look ahead. Let's look at the way that you are starting to engage kids in some of these higher order thinking skills, and let's push that. Let's grow in that. So if I know somebody sees something in me and they know that I'm starting to go this way and I earn this badge, it's going to make me better, then I'm going to be more apt to do that than somebody just saying, I go earn 3 micro-credentials and come back and see me when you're done. You know, that's 2 totally different conversations, and I think those are excellent conversations to have because we are in a place right now where we have no professional learning dollars, and people are looking for those free choices. But let's find a way, because these micro-credentials are high quality, let's find a way to wrap a system of supports around them so that a learner, a teacher, a principal, whoever, becomes better because of it, not just compliance. I'm so glad you brought that up, Greg.
So what we'd like to do for the next few minutes is think about what are some things we should look for. And I've heard some of the conversations: high quality work, standards that can be transferred from institution to institution, district to district, education cooperative to education cooperative. We're looking at that. But what are some things we need to look out for? You see the little guy on the burning rope up here. What are some things we need to look out for as well? So let's have that conversation and we'll come back together.
We're going to cut this conversation just a little bit short so we can get to all of the questions because they all have value. So as you're talking about what are some of the look fors and look out fors, what were some of the great conversations that were at your table? Any look fors or look out fors? Okay, thank you, Dr. Fletcher.
I think as a district administrator, a look out for me personally would be micromanaging, the micro-credential. Taking away that personalization because you want to cater things to what your district needs are, but you also want the teachers to have the autonomy to choose what they need. And with some input, of course, from a building level administrator. So a look out for me personally was trying to micromanage the micro-credentials. Of course, the others would be look fors. We would want to make sure we find, just like what we said before, quality. We want to make sure there are quality micro-credentials. Then that goes back to the micromanaging. But also, too, a look for is how do you, we've talked a lot about compensation and maybe a career ladder of sort or pay scale change. If you're going to give teachers a pay scale change based on a bundle or stack of micro-credentials, then to me, then the teacher should pay for the micro-credential. If you're not, then as a district, you should find ways to pay for that micro-credential, one way or the other, to help those teachers out. So look for is making sure compensation-wise that there's going to be benefit to the teacher, in my opinion, whether it be that counts as one of their PD days. Find ways to help them out because they're still parents and they still have time. But again, the look out for micromanaging the micro-credentials, I think.
Absolutely. And going back to that about the micromanaging, I shared in the session that I did this morning about an elementary school in our region where every teacher worked on the same micro-credential. That did not come down as we're all going to do this micro-credential. It came down to the fact that they worked together as a shared leadership team to analyze their data and say, oh, student engagement, we've got issues with that. You know, and then they saw this learner engagement micro-credential that they really thought addressed what their needs were, and they wanted to start moving into the area of micro-credentials, and they thought, this one would be a really good one. Let's all work on this together, because there's nothing that says that you have to go lock yourself in a room to work on a micro-credential. You can do it as a professional learning community. And in their grade level PLCs, they worked on that together. And there was absolutely no micromanaging there, but it was guided, it was facilitated. So I love that point.
We've taken two approaches in Lawrence County. One, every new teacher, whether you've taught this is your first year or this is your 15th year, if you're new to Lawrence County, you're going to take a micro-credential on assessment literacy. We didn't pay any extra. You're just going to get it done. If you're going to work for us, that's what you're going to do. But then we've also taken with teachers that are in the district, we've said, you know, there was a part of a grant where they got a stipend, where they finished a micro-credential, but then leaving those type of things open where they could count for their PD. So we've done we're absolutely you're going to complete this, and we've also said, okay, if you're in the district, we didn't require them to do a micro-credential, but there was some compensation or days they could count for their professional development days.
Yes, and the design, going back to those questions that we were talking about being based on standards, the micro-credential on assessment literacy is based on that foundational work of Rick Stiggins, Jan Chapuis, the research out there around assessment literacy, but the earners get to demonstrate their learning in a variety of ways, submitting examples of their assessments and their own written reflections on the assessments. So there is still learner choice, even though it is something that you're saying everybody must do.
Look out for that I can see, and we talked about here at this table, is participation. I'm sure the universities don't want to put all this work into this and then it not have the participation. And then you look at on the look forwards is how do you make this beneficial for teachers, school districts, and universities, and we can all work together on this thing. So we've looked, I know through some consortiums of working with Morehead State University. I think Trish has been involved in some of those discussions, and can they be part of their master's program and the teacher get a reduced rate? That way everybody is benefiting, the kids are benefiting the most. So
I think those models of collaboration are wonderful, and that's what we need to look for, is that to build this robust system of professional learning, it's going to take our EPPs and our K-12s and our co-ops and everybody working together. So thank you very much.
And is there a look for caution in packages that really are to meet training requirements as opposed to, and packaged to look like a micro-credential, as opposed to true professional learning experiences?
We call that a pig in a poke where I come from. All right, I'm gonna go at this one is one we didn't want to leave off, and we know we're tight on time, but I think it's important that we have this conversation. We're all coming to this from different perspective, whether you be a developer of micro-credentials or a K-12 superintendent or principal. You're coming for this from different perspectives. You're in post-secondary. What right now, where you are in this work, what do you wish that you had known coming into it? So what are those experiences from your work, those battle scars, that you wish you had known before you started the work? What are your lessons learned? And let's take about 3 or 4 minutes on that one, and you have a poster for that. Let's get those posted and share them out. are slow. The other session is out. And I don't want to cut into your break time. So what about lessons learned? Anybody want to share one good lesson for the road? One good lesson for the road. Ah, thank you. Somebody who has your all's best interest at heart. She's going to help you get out for a break.
We talked about the importance of making sure that you consider evidence, what's needed, and to make sure that you have either the technical capacity or the support that's needed to get that kind of evidence. And then what else was, what other point? The technology issue, broadband, all those kinds of things.
Yes, that is a very good point, because I've had, at least I can do this, the folks in our region earning micro-credentials who run into these technology roadblocks, we try to provide support and services to them, but you're going to have everybody from expert with technology to beginner with technology, and when you ask them to submit video files and they have to, upload and the file's too large and how do we do this, and you have to really think about, platform and technology matter when you're dealing with the micro-credential. So that is a wonderful lesson to learn. Where did my Debbie go? I'm going to turn it over to Debbie to wrap us up, but this was phenomenal. Your all's ideas and suggestions to further this work have been perfect.
We just wanted to give you some time to process. We had a couple more to go through, but let me show you. One of them was, do we have any lingering questions and concerns? And we know that we do. We have lots of unanswered questions and concerns. My little nod to conspiracy there is the Bigfoot conspiracy. So, but what we're really being asked to do is new work in a new way. That's really what we're being asked to do. So we have to break convention and figure out how to move forward with new work in a new way. That is our charge. So for us, we think collective genius is far better than our individual learning. So I love this graphic where the learning spreads from one group to another, from one group to another, all the way to where everyone is enlightened with the work. And that's what we hope to be able to do today with this process section. We wanted to process the information. We've got some really good information on the sides, but really, when we were table hopping, the conversations were rich and deep, and they were meaningful, and that's what we really wanted from you. You're able to reach all of us at a collective email, lead@louisville.edu, but we're also all in the book. So if anyone has any thoughts for the road, just the last questions to close out this session, I'll open it up to that. Dr. Gusky, would you like to? He doesn't want to say anything. I've tried to get him up here twice now. So thank you all so much for your time and attention. We appreciate it.